So joining me today, first of all, we have John Arnott to my left. He's a Procurement and Supply Chain Director at Atkins. John is passionate about developing and inspiring teams to create customer value and collaborate purposefully with stakeholders and suppliers in order to achieve strategic business objectives. Next to John, we have Alex Maria, Global Managing Consultant, Diversity, Equity and Inclusion at the Clear Company. Alex has got more than 10 years of leadership experience in inclusive procurement and supply chain management. As a previous procurement professional and a chair of a race employee network, he has extensive experience in working with and influencing senior stakeholders on supplier diversity. And also on the end here now, we have William Kapfer, or Bill. He's Global Head of Supplier Diversity at JP Morgan. He's described here as a seasoned senior supply chain management expert, diversity, equity and inclusion leader with cross-industry experience in communications, marketing and financial services. So please welcome your panel for today. Okay, and as I said, we're going to be talking about relationships because procurement is all about relationships, right? And while it can feel safer and easier to work with a few tried and tested preferred suppliers, you could be missing out on a huge range of new products and services by keeping your circle small. Working with new and diverse suppliers not only helps your business, but it can help the community by supporting local businesses, help you find supply chains you might not have access to elsewhere, and drive up competition, all of which, of course, very important, can save you money in the long run. So let's get right to it. John, turn to you first. What are the benefits, would you say, in using diverse suppliers?
I think you just reeled off quite a few, so you kind of answered it for me to an extent. But now I think there's a wide range of benefits, and it can depend on the sector you operate in, private, public sector from a UK perspective. It can depend on the category of spend that you're looking at. And I think the key is to make sure that the benefits that you're targeting can be related to by your stakeholder group. So it might be that you want to build resilience in the supply chain, you want to drive up optionality and just drive up competition. And as a result of that, drive down spend. So there might be a spend objective or a savings objective. But also it might be to drive innovation, or in the public sector in the UK, it might just be that actually your clients just demand it. There's a social value imperative and it's fundamental to every tender that certainly Atkins will bid on. Yeah. And you just can't get away from it. So the fact that bringing in diverse suppliers and expanding that network will go a long way to satisfying some of our key clients. So.
Okay, and you mentioned innovation there, and you also talked quite a lot there about the UK perspective. Bill might have a different view here as well. How can diverse suppliers drive innovation in the procurement process from your point?
If I can, before I jump, I just wanted to build on something that you said about the benefits of, we're finding two other benefits. One is when you're looking to recruit the Gen Z and Gen Y, they're looking for companies that they're aligned with on social issues, that they're actually making decisions based on wallets. Are you spending and showing up in the communities where they live and work? And they're going to make their decisions based on those sorts of things that you're doing, showing up in their communities. So I just wanted to jump on that. And will you repeat that question again about?
Yeah, sure. So it's how can diverse suppliers drive innovation in the procurement process?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as probably you've all heard that when we talk about diverse suppliers, they're agile, they are innovative, they are quick to market, et cetera. I have a story that I'd asked one of my prime suppliers about, what is your biggest pain point? And they said, getting a product to market. Who else are you able to jump on the phone with? One of your main suppliers, are you able to jump on the phone with and talk to the CEO on a Saturday night about something you need out on a Monday? That's what these our diverse suppliers are also offering. There's also a diversity of thought. I see it as a mosaic, if you will, a stained glass. We are stronger through our diversity because each of those diverse suppliers you bring into your supply chain offers a different shape, size, color, tile, held together by this, what is it called, that piping they use? It's lead piping. If you have a hole in one of those tiles, the whole thing doesn't fall apart. If you put all of your investment in just these same prime over and over, you don't have this strong, diverse lens to look through and to diversify your supply chain.
Okay, thanks, Bill. And Alex, bringing you in here, I mean, it might sound straightforward, but how can companies actually source diverse suppliers?
Yes, it might sound straightforward. However, it's one of the main challenges when it comes to a supplier diversity program and their success. It's actually finding those diverse suppliers for your requirements. So from a UK perspective, and you have different channels you can leverage. There are organizations that have now been created to encourage and bring together, for example, ethnic minority businesses or women-owned businesses. So it's connecting with those organizations. Just to name a few, there's MSD UK, focus on ethnic minority-owned businesses, or We Connect on women-owned businesses, for example. Again, that's from a UK perspective. And there are other organizations in this space. Also, there are Chamber of Commerce that can help you engage with those small and diverse businesses. I think it's important to really tap into all those different channels. But what I would say is, before looking at how do we find diverse suppliers, I think it starts first by looking inward at your own procurement processes to ensure that once you engage with those suppliers, you can actually drive those benefits and collaborate with them. And I'm sure we'll discuss this point later on, so I will hold back.
Okay.
I'd say it's what I've found is that when you work in a big organisation and you're trying to develop your category strategy, as a buyer or a category manager, you don't tend to go and visit 100 different exhibitions or go and tap into the Chambers of Commerce or look at those kind of SME directories. You just don't. I think there's almost a bit of a mismatch between the different channels that we have available. We're not quite in that space where we're kind of looking in the right places. So I think you've got to change the perception internally within the procurement function. Actually, you've got to make the effort to go and try and use these channels and find those suppliers in a way that you perhaps wouldn't usually do.
I was just going to toss in on a global lens, so the equivalent of our MSD UK and our We Connect or NMSDC in the US, the WeBank, the Women's Business Enterprise Network Council, but there's also LGBT Senate Chamber of Commerce, the Disability In for Disability, National Veterans Development Council. And there's also showing up at category-specific sort of events around, there are blacks in technology, there are women in real estate. Showing up at those events as well will provide you an opportunity to meet the new suppliers.
Okay, thank you. And okay, so sustainability. Now, can diverse suppliers have an impact on an organization's sustainability? Alex?
Yes, I think absolutely. Like any suppliers can have an impact in this space. But here I would put the onus on those large corporate or public sector organizations. They're the one influencing their whole supply chain by their product requirements, service requirements, their contract terms. So I think it starts with actually the large corporates. Then I think diverse and small businesses that are agile and from the start have embraced sustainability can influence the organization. But for me, it starts with those large corporates really incorporating sustainability principle into their products and their requirements, to then also support their supply chain and those small suppliers to join them in the journey.
And do you think some of the regulations that are coming in, and some of the compliance, certainly in the US and I'm thinking in Germany as well, do you think this is an opportunity for some organisations to look for more diverse suppliers? Rather than it being a barrier or potential hurdle, there's an opportunity here.
Yeah, we've actually at JP Morgan Chase stood up a department focusing on sustainability within sourcing and procurement. We have our broader sourcing and our broader ESG program across the entire organization, but we've stood up a specific program run by someone rooted in sourcing to look through the lenses of a buyer and a procurement professional at how to address the ESG with a little heavier focus on the S, if you will, the social interaction, but a professional comes from that space.
And By the way, I'm going to come for any are there any questions so far? I'm going to come back to the audience in a minute, but just in case there's any questions burning at the moment. Okay, no questions, that's fine. Okay, John, what steps can businesses take to increase the diversity within their supply chains?
I think it all starts with a business case. I think you have to treat a supply diversity program as any change program. And with any change program, you need that clear business case up front. You need that sponsorship, both from within procurement and from across the business and the different stakeholder groups. I think without that sponsorship and endorsement, I think you'll struggle to get the traction. And then once you've got that sponsorship, it becomes easier to sell that across your stakeholder groups. You can easily sell the vision. And we've talked already about the different channels that are available. You've got to then get out there and try and use the channels that are available. Mentioned a few, US, UK specific, and perhaps use those channels in a way that you haven't traditionally used them. But I think it all starts with having clear sponsorship, having a clear business case, making sure that your stakeholders understand what the benefits will be for them. It's got to be more than just a concept. It can't just be a tick in the box. You've got to try and understand how it's going to add tangible value. And that goes back to some of the benefits that we talked about earlier. But that's the start point, and you've got to treat it as a change program, I think.
I would say building off of yours around having that executive sponsorship would be being intentional around holding those lines of business function leaders accountable. And I know at JP Morgan, we are holding our line of business leaders responsible based on a percentage that they have to actually deliver on. And so then they have a little bit more skin in the game.
Yeah.
That's a good point. I mean, whose responsibility ultimately is it? Like you're talking about, getting buy-in, getting sponsorship. Who should be making those decisions in your mind?
I just think the role of procurement, you're the puppet master, aren't you, to a degree? You've got to try and pull the strings. So whether it's supply diversity or the ESG agenda, more broadly, I think the role of procurement as that the middleman, if you like, if you use that phrase, and that's your job to create that business case and sell that vision. I think again, for me, the role of procurement is to act as the catalyst, to try and help the business, deliver their own business objectives.
And I would add one point here is also the role of the diversity and inclusion lead in the organization to work in collaboration with procurement to ensure any supplier diversity actions or program have a clear link to the overall D&I strategy. So then it's stakeholders working together to deliver the company objectives and deliver the benefits that are appropriately targeted, holding people accountable. I think D&I and procurement working together is a key component of success.
If you've got D&I, obviously.
If you have a D&I team.
I think it's still quite a new... Sounds like, Bill, you've got quite a good-sized team for that.
I think the bow on all of that is having your CEO buy in, and then she articulates that down. Because when you have the boss saying, this is something that we're all agreeing on and we're locking arms on, it really helps.
Okay, and so some of the sessions we had yesterday actually were looking a lot into risk in the supply chain and looking into like scope 3, for instance. And if you are changing suppliers, you could be introducing new risk into the business, especially when it comes to like cyber security, for instance. So, Bill, what's the best advice you would give businesses on how they can vet these new suppliers or guard against bad actors and cyber attacks? Because cyber attacks happening all the time.
Yeah, and I think like most all financial services organizations, we are constantly the predators are looking for opportunities to get inside our financial services institutions with our main goal is our customers and clients' information. So we really need to be, and we really are making that a priority at the bank. We've actually stood up a program with 4 other financial services institutions, American Express, Wells Fargo, BNY Mellon, to create a program called TrueSight. It's an assessment tool that assesses a company's cybersecurity risk. We don't want to have risks that our diverse suppliers have somehow creeping in, or we're then adopting their shortcomings. So we actually have a cybersecurity tool that will put them on give them a risk assessment number, and as they fall short with, could be the cyber insurance coverage, which could be 100 or 150,000, I guess dollars. I guess now it's dollar for dollar here.
Dollar for pound.
But so what we've done is we've been able to identify those, and then to back that up and not just say, hey, here's where you're falling short, we've actually created a grant fund to help underwrite those challenges that the folks are having, to have them navigate and give them the resources to bring them whole, so that they are ready to be corporate ready and financial services ready.
Yeah, I was thinking about that in terms of it is a natural conflict and a barrier. We ask a lot of our suppliers when we onboard them, and we tend, because we want a standardized process, because it's more efficient, we tend to treat, a large corporation the same as an SME, and they're just not able and capable, to live with some of the expectations that we have around insurance policies, or do they hold kind of a cyber essentials certification. So it's a great point. I think you've got to try and actually, if you want to work with them, you've got to try and help them, get them on board first, because there are some natural barriers, I think, all the way through the procurement process.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. I was going to ask Alex, actually, at this point. Do larger organizations need to almost act like mentors for working with more diverse suppliers?
I think they do have a role to play as mentor or coach to support those diverse or small businesses to navigate their way into a large corporate. When you're small suppliers, it can be hard to just get to the right contacts, to have visibility on opportunities. And once you have those opportunities and you come in, is to adapt to the culture and company processes. I think the corporates have a responsibility to also ensure those small and diverse businesses will be successful, and give them at least the opportunity and all the tools to be successful in the organization. So they do have a key role to play.
So in a way, that traditional sort of supplier relationship, it's more of a partnership, really, or it could be.
It could be, yeah, it could be, absolutely. I think it could be with any suppliers, bearing in mind that you, as procurement professional, you want to create competitive tension and ensure you get the right price points, the right quality, and innovation, and that comes also with this competitive tension. But then you also, to drive innovation, you need this trusted relationship and allow your suppliers to come in with disruptive ideas, and also give your stakeholders room and space to listen to those ideas. That's where you want to have partnership in place to do that.
Where you're spot on, I ladder up to the head of business partner diversity. So to your point, it's a partnership. It's not you're a supplier and we're a recipient of your product or service. It's a partnership.
And I suppose that can only strengthen that relationship as well, right? When people feel they are more of a partner rather than just a supplier who's competing solely on price, for instance, right? They have something else that they're offering the buyer, if you like. Okay, Alex, I'm going to stick with you here. What would you say are the key tenets for creating a strong supplier diversity program? What are the key points that people can take away?
Yeah, so there are a few. If I stick to three, at a macro level, and I think John mentioned it earlier, we start the business case or the vision. So what is your why? Why do you want to have a supplier diversity program? How does it link to your D&I strategy, to your overall business goals? That's a starting point. I think one of the key tenets. The second one, I would say, is your stakeholder engagement and stakeholder groups. So you have this holistic approach on how you might collaborate with the D&I, your HR team, your budget holders, your innovation team, and how you bring everyone together to treat this as a change program if you're starting from scratch, and bring all those stakeholders together, aligned to the vision, and delivering the benefits. And then, as a final point, I started to mention it earlier, is to look inward and on your processes. So do you have inclusive procurement processes in place in terms of how you tender, how you contract, and those terms, like payment terms, warranty terms, liability terms, are they inclusive? Or you're giving a fair opportunity to those small and diverse businesses to contract with you. So as a minimum, I would say those three are key tenets. And as a bonus, then I will add data. Back to Bill's point around measuring success and holding people accountable, you need data, but also data to capture how your supply base looks like today, how diverse it is currently, and where you want to take it, and measure progress over the years. So those are the key points from my point of view.
Anyone have any key points to add to that, or a bonus tenet?
Well, I would just want to add one thing. For us, we've actually pulled out and have identified our top 125, 150 suppliers, and we've called them our gold suppliers, and we're holding them accountable to have supplier diversity programs and be reporting spend with their diverse suppliers. And we found when we did this assessment, there were probably 20 that didn't have a supplier diversity program. So if we're going to make this an obligation, we made it our obligation to help build those programs from scratch. And over the last year, we've been able to help build every one of those programs. And we've actually then held them accountable for all of the golds for actually the increased spend with diverse suppliers in their own supply chains in writing. And as of now, we're at $6.2 billion of additional spend over the next 3 years from our own suppliers that have committed.
Just 2 points I wanted to make with it. I think the first one that Bill's alluded to is that actually you don't have to be working directly with SMEs to have an active supply diversity program. So actually, you can make sure that your big tier one suppliers, you've got those expectations with those suppliers that they are running their own, supply diversity programs. And actually, at a kind of tier one level for some categories of spend, it might not be appropriate, to go out and contract with SMEs directly. My previous role at Rolls-Royce, managing logistics spend, global business, you're never going to contract directly with 300 SMEs, haulage firms, but you made sure that your kind of, tier one suppliers were kind of relaying your expectations. And the other point is just around spend. I do have a bit of an issue with spend being the kind of number one measure around, how good are you at working with SMEs and diverse suppliers, because it can be a bit of a red herring. And for me, that's not the measure of success, that's the input. You should be measuring the impact, whether that's innovation or better resilience or some of the things we talked about earlier.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, actually. Okay, look, I'm going to ask all of you now individually. So we've talked a lot about the benefits here, but obviously there are challenges as well. So starting with Alex, actually, what are some of the biggest challenges when you're trying to create supply partnerships that are more diversity-minded?
So we've touched on a few. We've mentioned around how do you actually identify and source those diverse suppliers. Then if you're looking to influence your tier one, how you do that, how to do that effectively, and back to holding them accountable, which then might be a challenge in terms of how you contract with those tier one suppliers and incorporate some obligation in your contract terms, with them. But then it's one thing to put a requirement in the contracts, another to then track and report and measure where the impact is or where progress is needed, because you need resources. So often it's an area where there are limited resources that are focused on managing risk, driving innovation, managing their spend. So there's limited time to then focus on those other trends of procurement and supplier diversity. So that's another challenge. And I know John and Bill have a long list as well to share.
Well, Bill, you go first, because obviously you've implemented a lot of the things that Alex was talking about there. So how are you measuring that and reporting on that?
Well, first I wanted to build on what some of the challenges are, and the challenges sometimes involves communicating and changing the mindset of our own executives who think that using a diverse supplier means you're compromising quality or you're compromising cost, which is not the truth. And I know a few times we've actually said if the diverse supplier comes in at X number or X percent lower, we'll go ahead with them. And I said, you just need to give them a seat at the table and let them bring their wares and bring their goods to the conversation. So it's often recommunicating the fact that these are really amazing suppliers with great products and goods and services that can serve our needs. But as for the reporting, if you can ask that question again, what was the reporting question?
It was, just some of the biggest challenges trying to create supply partnerships. But Alex mentioned the fact that you can implement or you can get the tier one suppliers to implement a more diverse supplier strategy.
Right.
But how do you actually measure that? Or how do you report on that to make sure that that's happening?
Well, for us, internally we have our internal mechanisms for counting tier 2 and tier 1, broken down by the diversity stripes, so that we know where we're falling short and where we might need to put a little extra muscle. And we have the same sort of tracking we do for all of our tier 1 prime suppliers around them reporting their tier 2 to us in a tier 2 system on a quarterly basis.
John, you got a long list for us?
No. I think just to add to, I think the biggest challenge is that it's to be able to work with a more diverse set of suppliers, you kind of have to change every step of your procurement process. And we've kind of mentioned some of the challenges, but right from the outset, suppliers who don't have the same kind of marketing power as some of the bigger corporations, they struggle to find a way in. So you've got to actually go and search. Then when you're onboarding suppliers, again, you've got to try and be a bit more flexible because, again, in the presentation this morning, we talked a bit about standardizing the procurement process. And what we're talking about here is actually trying to create something that's not a one-size-fits-all. So every step of the process, onboarding suppliers, contracting, your terms and conditions, maybe even your payment terms, having to be flexible and try and sell that internally to the business without creating that perception of risk, I think is really, really difficult.
Your point about not one size fits all, it's really, I think, to be successful, you're meeting them where they are because each one has their own individual collection of experiences they're bringing to the table. And if you can meet them where they are, you'll probably be a little more successful with them.
Okay, are there any questions from the audience here in the room? We've got several that have come in. Okay, could we get a microphone down here, please? I'm just going to ask one of the virtual questions first, but we will come to you. We've had a lot of questions that have come in, actually. Let me just have a quick scroll through. This is going back to one of the early roles or the early discussion points we had, which was about the sponsorship. So has the sponsorship for diversity been simple to achieve? And what blockers have you actually seen? Who'd like to take that?
I don't mind going with that one. It's definitely not easy. And I think it depends a lot on how mature your kind of start point is. So I think what can be a challenge is, it depends on the status quo within your organization or even within your procurement function. Organizations and particularly your kind of operations stakeholders can get very comfortable with incumbency. So what they like is consistency, continuity, and actually, having preferred suppliers and diverse suppliers, that can coexist in the same supply chain. But actually, it takes a bit of effort to try and get those stakeholders around to that way of thinking that actually change is good. When what they need is quality, delivery, cost, stable, no surprises. So it's definitely not easy, and it does take a lot of selling to really kind of land that vision with the exec sponsors.
And would you say, sorry, I'll come back to you in a second, Bill. Would you say that has been made easier or harder with, obviously with all the supply chain disruption and everything else we've seen? Are organizations thinking, we just need to, ensure we've got supply, and while it's a nice to have, right now it's just making sure we've got what we need?
I think it becomes easier because it's created the ability to have those conversations. Because you're right, you could say that the way to get to reduce risk is to stick with your trusted and preferred suppliers. On the flip side of that, actually, by creating the optionality, you're naturally improving your resilience. So, and generally the emergence of the ESG agenda and some of the those corporate targets that are now firmly rooted around ESG data and reporting. I think that makes it easier to start the conversation as well.
Sorry, Bill, you were going to...
Oh, I was just going to say, at JP Morgan, it's been probably made a little bit easier in that we've stood up centers of excellence for every diversity stripe. So we have a with senior executive sponsorship and leadership in each of those. So minority, women, LGBT, veteran, disabled, each of those have a center of excellence lead who's a senior executive who is our champion, and we also are looking to share our successes with the diverse supplier that lives within their stripe with them so that they can communicate out for the overall 360 picture of how they're showing up in the community.
Okay, we'll just take the audience first. Thank you for your patience, by the way. If you just say your name and where you're from.
Seb Butt from Kraft. Thanks for the great panel. Bill, you mentioned kind of earlier that when you start working with your tier ones, you're trying to figure out as well, are they working with diverse suppliers? And I'm guessing that exercise is probably a little bit easier to do in the US because you have the kind of, it's mandated, right, to report on minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, etc. We wanted to understand perhaps maybe looking at Europe, what are the ways in which that could be understood better as well? What data sets are available? Are there any options to look at kind of at scale whether a company is owned by a diverse individual or individuals, and how can those who are managing those tier ones get that data quickly? Is it purely reliant on surveys, or is there anything else we can use, maybe using external data?
Our partners within the UK, and I'll use the UK, but Europe in general, EMEA, or all of globally, we partner with our third-party certification agencies and their affiliates. So in the UK, it would be MSD UK and working with Mayank and that team, or We Connect for our women-owned businesses. But we tap into those organizations because they have already started the vetting process, and they've grown out of, or are sisters of, the certification agencies that we are already successfully working with in the US.
Okay, thank you for your question. Alex, I think we'll have time just for one more. I'll come to you for this one. How does supplier diversity promote value addition and compliance in a fair and competitive procurement process?
So that's a good question. So how does it promote fair? And could you repeat?
Yeah, it says how does it promote value addition, so adding value, and compliance in a fair and competitive procurement process?
I think so. Starting with a fair and competitive process, engaging with. So that's why you want to open up your procurement process to ensure you provide a fair level competing field to your suppliers. So you give them a fair chance to compete. So you want to engage with diverse suppliers so they have the opportunity to be part of your RFP process. So that's like step one. If then you give a fair opportunity to those diverse suppliers, often they will bring in innovation. Like John mentioned earlier. They bring in different perspectives, different set of services and products, which then might actually deliver value to your organizations. Then to ensure you harness the value of their product or services, you need to give them the chance in the first place, and then once they come in, to provide this coaching, if needed, to those suppliers so they can really strive and perform in collaboration with your stakeholders. And then you want to report on the success and shout about it. That's where I love this example of having champions and really celebrating success and reporting on them. I think that's a key point to demonstrate the value of those programs and carry on securing the sponsorship and having more and more advocates internally as well as externally to drive the benefit of your program.
John?
Yeah, just to add to that, I think it's also important to recognise that this is not about the benefit of including diverse suppliers, excluding other forms of suppliers, and actually you still evaluate your suppliers in exactly the same way. I don't think there's any kind of preferential treatment of diverse suppliers. At the end of the day, your metrics and your evaluation criteria when you're going out and doing your sourcing should remain absolutely consistent. I think it's more about just it's providing those opportunities so that the SMEs and diverse suppliers can actually have the platform to compete as opposed to not. But I think you evaluate suppliers and you're evaluating the outcomes in exactly the same way. And there should be no preferential treatment.
And final thought, Bill?
I was just going to say, to your point, it's not a zero-sum game. We're not taking from one to give to another. There's plenty of pie for people to be part of and get a slice of.
Okay, plenty of pie out there.
Plenty of pie.
That's all we've got time for. Thank you so much to John, to Alex, and to Bill. Thank you, guys.